pretty much. I have two friends who speak English as a native language, and the rest of everyone else, like all my friends from Morocco, Africa, the Central Asians, they think it's kind of not really a big deal. So I found making friends with people inside my own community. Because if you mollycoddle everyone,
Thank
they
you.
know it's trust.
Thank you all for being here. I would like to start by saying we respectfully acknowledge we are on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples who have been the guardians of Mother Earth since the immemorial. I'm excited and honored to introduce to you the Kingston and Thousand Islands federal election candidates. Candidates, when I say your name, please raise your hand. From the People's Party of Canada, Andy Brooke. Andy is a retired RCMP with 28 years of service. Andy is a father of 5 and has 6 grandchildren. We know Andy from his community advocacy for veterans, the reopening of the prison farm, and his support of the Yes campaign. From the New Democratic Party of Canada, Barrington Walker. Barrington parents immigrated to Canada from Jamaica in the late 1960s and worked hard to make lives for their families here in Canada. Barrington has been teaching Canadian history at Queen's University since 2002 when he came to Kingston with his wife and 2 sons. Barrington wants Canada to be a place of opportunity, inclusion, and fairness for everyone. From the Green Party, Candace Christmas. Candace was born and raised in Montreal and moved to Kingston in 1990. Candace has 2 children. Many of Kingston's local youth, mental health, and social justice groups have been benefited from Candace's active volunteering. Candace has worked in the Kingston area and has experience with medical education, agriculture, women and youth issues, and much more. From the Liberal Party of Canada, Mark Gerritsen. Mark grew up in Kingston and was a student at St. Lawrence College. He went on to earn an economics degree at Queen's University before starting his own business. In 2006, Mark was elected to Kingston City Council for Portsmouth District, which includes the college, and was then elected Mayor of Kingston in 2010. In 2015, Mark was elected to be our Member of Parliament. During this first term, he has kept his promises to reopen the prison farms and secure funding for the 3rd Crossing Bridge. Mark Gerritsen was in the very first group of Kingstonians to generate electricity from solar panels under the Ontario Microfit program, and his family has been driving electric vehicles since 2011. He lives in Kingston with his wife and 3 kids. From the Conservative Party of Canada, Ruslan Yakovichuk. Ruslan is a father of 2 daughters and moved to Kingston in 2005, started a construction business, then realized he wanted to give back to Canadians. Ruslan became an active member of the Conservative Party of Canada in 2014. While we welcome these candidates, I would like to remind you to please be respectful and to take this opportunity to ask insightful questions that you or others may be having. My name is Ellen McFeeters, and I'm the Student Association Interim President. Welcome, candidates, and thank you again for being at St. Lawrence College with us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at the All Candidates meeting at St. Lawrence College. My name is Lena McElroy.
My name is Leighton Davison, and we will be your student moderators for today. This All Candidates meeting has been organized by the Student Association to answer all student questions regarding the upcoming election. All questions have been submitted by the student body in the weeks prior to this meeting.
The main topics that we'll be covering today are the climate crisis, healthcare, affordable housing, LGBTQ plus issues, vote splitting, energy independence, and affordable childcare. The 2-hour meeting has been separated into 2 sections: an organized question and answer segment, followed by an open forum question at the end. The questions will be posed to the candidates, and they will each have 90 seconds to answer. They'll be answered from the audience's left to right. We ask the audience to remain respectful throughout the entire debate and remain silent so we can all focus on the candidates' answers.
Okay, thank you. Let's get it going. The first topic is climate change and the current climate crisis. We're going to start with Mr. Andy Brooke to the audience's left. The issue of climate change has been around for a while. In March, the City of Kingston declared a climate emergency. More recently, we have seen grassroots advocacy on behalf of climate change. Last week of September saw a record 7.6 million people take to the streets to strike for climate action worldwide. In the past 2 or 3 years, we have seen record high water in Lake Ontario, which has caused significant problems for locals who live on its shores. Our question for the candidates is, what programs and policies will you support or introduce to help mitigate and reverse the effects of climate change in Kingston, across Canada, and around the world? Please be specific in regards to current studies, scientific reports, and international policies related to climate change. Mr. Brooke, you may begin.
Is that working? So let's come right out of the gate. Our party is the only party that will withdraw out of the Paris Agreement. We will eliminate the carbon tax. The reason we want to withdraw out of the Paris Agreement is we don't believe it's really about climate in itself. And I'll read you a quote from an IPCC official back in 2010 before Paris was signed. The quote reads, "One has to free oneself from the illusion that international climate policy is environmental policy. Instead, climate change policy is about how we redistribute de facto the world's wealth." And there's a similar statement here, but I don't have time in 90 seconds, from AOC's Chief of Staff. The Paris Agreement is essentially a lot, if each country wrote down its position on a piece of paper and stapled it together, that's essentially what the Paris Agreement is. And if you begin by looking at China, for example, which is the world's largest emitter, we're about 1.6%. I believe they're just under 30%. Their only submission to the climate situation is that they're going to intensify until 2030 and perhaps stop. China is listed in the agreement as a developing country. The Global Green Fund redistributes wealth from countries that are developed, such as Canada, to the developing countries. I do not view China as a developing country. And given the geopolitical situation we have with China on a number of levels, most recently Hong Kong, detained Canadians, human rights, what they're doing in trade, Huawei infrastructure.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brooke, that's 90 seconds. Thank you. Moving on now to Mr. Walker, you have 90 seconds. Thank you.
The NDP government, or the NDP party rather, is aware that we're in the midst of a climate emergency. We have taken seriously the IPCC guidelines on what we need to do to significantly reduce our carbon emissions by 2030. And we believe that the evidence for a climate emergency is irrefutable. So there are a number of policy planks that the NDP has as part of its plan that we call the New Deal for People. We are going to reduce carbon emissions by half by 2030, some 430 metric tons of CO2. We are going to leave carbon in the ground. Our leader has made a commitment that we will no longer be subsidizing oil and gas companies. So that's one of the first orders of business of an NDP government, will be to no longer subsidize oil and gas. We are also going to pivot to a green economy. The NDP not only believes in sustainability, but we're also a party that is committed to workers and the working class, and that's a proud part of our identity. And as we make the pivot to a post-carbon economy, we want to make sure that we don't leave those workers behind. And we're going to create 300,000 green jobs in our pivot to the post-green economy. And lastly, we're also going to set up a climate bank in order to spur innovation, entrepreneurship, for green initiatives across Canada. And not quite lastly, we're also going to...
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. I'm sorry, Mr. Walker, I apologize. That's 90 seconds.
I will talk about that.
Now, Ms. Candice Christmas, you may begin.
All right, the Green Party has been in the green business for a very, very long time. Dating back to 1984, the Greens have been fighting to save our climate. Elizabeth May, our leader, was one of the fundamental architects of the Montreal Agreement that helped to heal the ozone situation on our planet with the Conservative government in the Mulroney years. So we have a plan called Mission Possible, and I encourage you to look it up. It's a digestible 5-page document, but what it speaks to is the IPCC targets that were released in the 2018 report, and that our plan will eliminate GHGs by 60% by 2030, tracking towards net zero emissions by 2050. How are we going to do that? Revenue net neutrality for carbon pricing. We are looking at soil as our greatest secret weapon, so we have a whole host of new agricultural programs with respect to going back to more sustainable forms of farming, but also using particular crops like hemp, for example, for carbon sequestering. We are also looking at, again, stimulating good green jobs to the effect of, with respect to student jobs, $1.2 billion to create 160,000 new positions, what we call the Youth, Community, and Environmental Service Corps. And that will go directly to communities. And so we envision St. Lawrence students being a big part of that.
Seconds. Thank you. Moving on now to Mr. Gerritsen. You may begin.
Thank you very much, and thank you to St. Lawrence College for organizing this. I'll start by saying that it's been a struggle over the last 4 years being in the House of Commons and listening to what people have to say about climate change. I sit across from a number of conservatives who talk about carbon as though it's plant food, and that we're demonizing the use of fossil fuels. And I'm pretty sure that everybody in this room, if not all, most, believe in climate change. We've put forward a few things in addition to the price on pollution, which we brought in last year. What we hope to move forward with is a ban on single-use plastics by 2021, reach net zero by 2050, plant 2 billion trees throughout Canada within the next 10 years to keep our air clean, and invest $40,000 of interest-free loans for people to do green renovations. And as part of our overall plan, one of the things that we've highlighted is to invest $100 million in skills training to ensure that there are enough qualified workers to keep up with energy audits, retrofits, and net zero home construction. And I think that's important to point out to this crowd, because St. Lawrence College in particular has the Energy Systems Engineering Technology program, which this particular fund would heavily be able to support.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritsen. Mr. Jakovichuk, you may begin.
Conservative government has actually a real plan how to fight climate change. We believe in green technology, not taxation. First thing, we will remove carbon tax. As we can see, liberals miss all the targets. And as a first hand, I'm a certified builder, net zero home builder. I actually build homes for 5 years. And we will introduce the green home tax credit so people actually can upgrade their homes and have a greener home. And we will bring the green public transit tax credit. We believe fight climate change globally. We don't believe to punish hard-working Canadians in Canada.
Thank you for your answers, candidates. We will now move to the second question.
So the next question is regarding healthcare, and we're going to be starting with Barrington Walker. Just want to pass the microphone back, please. Thank you. We simply do not have enough resources and infrastructure in place to provide adequate care for patients in Kingston. Units are often, if not always, short-staffed. We do not have enough beds, and many patients are discharged prematurely. Vital sign towers, which are essential to providing basic head-to-toe assessments, are scarce. What viable and realistic solutions are you and your party offering that directly help Kingstonians and municipalities who need resourceful healthcare but are not able to access it?
The NDP realizes that healthcare is one of the #1 concerns that Canadians have. It's right up there with the environment, and it's right up there with affordability. We are proposing that we are going to radically expand the program of healthcare that was started by one of the founders of the NDP, Tommy Douglas, and we are going to expand it to what we call head-to-toe healthcare. So the basic principle of our healthcare plan is that when you, for example, go to get medicine, you've all had the experience of going to Shoppers Drug Mart and paying for medicine, that when it comes time to pay for it, you'll be paying with your health card and not your credit card. So we want to implement a universal pharmacare program. We also want to expand the healthcare system to include things like mental health care, vision care, and dental care. So it's our belief that these sorts of investments are long overdue. We need targeted investments in healthcare. We also need to ensure that through the transfers we give the provincial governments and working with provincial governments that we can eliminate things like hallway medicine and doctor shortages in places like Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. If you could just pass the phone to me.
So the Green Party, our entire platform is actually founded by the Sustainable Development Goals. So those of you studying global health, for example, might be familiar with those. And really what we're talking about is making sure that no Canadian is left behind, that we're talking about the basics, we're talking about prevention and early screening. So one of the things, for example, that we struggle with here is the fact that first of all, our Ministry of Health is provincial jurisdiction, but it's the biomedical model and it's founded basically on interventions and medicine. Our emphasis is going to be on finding creative ways to create communities, for example, of wraparound care for seniors, where we can create co-op housing, but also ensure that the facilities that they need with respect to clinical, psychological help, social work, and so on can actually be found within those communities so that they are getting the help that they need on time. As well with seniors, we know that people are being discharged from hospital far too early with not enough supports in the home. So again, this is something in our jurisdiction federally that we can help with. Mental health and addictions is a huge emphasis in our platform. We want to ensure, again, that we have systems of wraparound care for particularly youth, but also folks that are dealing with addictions throughout their lives. And also in this particular community, our soldiers, our first responders, and so on that are dealing with PTSD. So our emphasis is really on upstream, on keeping people healthy.
Thank you. Healthcare is a very complicated issue because of the fact that it is delivered by the province primarily, but there's always a federal role. So whatever strategy that we come up with usually has to be in collaboration between the two levels of government. My 1.5-year-old just had an unfortunate accident last week and we ended up in the hospital, and to see the stretchers with people on them literally in the hallways because there weren't enough beds really was shocking and alarming to witness. The reality of the situation is that you know, with Doug Ford and the current Conservatives in place and provincially, we're going to see more of this. And my biggest fear is that we end up with Andrew Scheer as Prime Minister, and then we continue to see that happen at the national level as well. What we're talking about from a national level with respect to healthcare is first bringing in universal pharmacare. Nobody in our community should be picking between eating or paying their rent and paying for their medicines. And there are a lot of people who only take half of what they're prescribed because you know, they can save money for those other things. And then the other thing that I would talk about is access to family doctors. This is a problem not just in Kingston, but throughout the country. And we've also indicated in our platform with respect to healthcare that we will be bringing forward a national strategy of how we retain and attract more doctors to come and set up in communities throughout the country.
Your time is up. Thank you.
The Conservative government actually guarantee health and social programs at least 3% a year, and we will invest $1.5 billion for MRI and CT equipment, and it's interesting, Liberals campaign keep bringing Doug Ford. I think we all know this is federal election, and we know provincial Liberals have lots of empty seats, so if somebody wants to represent provincial Liberals, they can go, but Conservative government will strongly stand to help. We guarantee at least 3% money will actually give access to disability tax credit that will give access to 35,000 Canadians. And we know we have a big issue, and I know as a first hand, my wife worked at the clinic, I know doctors, and when I came here to Canada, I could find family doctor, and past 14 years we still have the same problem.